say hello to a very, very important Mercedes. So important in fact that this could be the first Merc to actually outsell the E-Class. But before the GLA does that, it has to outperform the BMW X1 and be more desirable than the Mini Countryman. Now before we go ahead with this comparo, let me remind you to subscribe to the Evo India channel and hit that bell icon so you stay notified for all our videos. And I'm told that YouTube's algorithm now prioritizes the like. So please smash that like button so that more enthusiasts such as yourself check out this video. Now let's start with part 1 of the video where we focus on the new kid on the block, the GLA obviously. Now I could talk about the GLA for 12 hours non-stop, the earlier generation GLA, because we literally drove that all over the world. Back in 2015, along with our friends from Auto Today, we shipped the Made in India GLA to Stuttgart and then drove it through 11 countries across Eastern Europe, Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, China, Nepal, and then down to Pune where it was made. And then a year later, along with our friends from NDTV, we drove the GLA through 5 continents. I did the Africa leg, driving it across Morocco, and then drove it from the east coast to the west coast of Australia, including a significant stretch of the outback, and finally from Bangkok across Thailand through Myanmar and then back to Pune. You could say I possess an intimate knowledge of the old GLA. So the new GLA has plenty to live up to, and at least on the styling front, it knocks it right out of the park. If you remember the old GLA, it took inspiration from the A-Class and it sort of was like a rebodied A-Class, whereas this has a proper SUV-ish stance and it looks really good, at least to my eye. Now, this is the 220D which gets the off-road package. Off-road package means 19-inch rims, and this also has the AMG line body kit. So you have the AMG logo embossed on these alloys. The AMG line also gets these flared nostrils, which lends a good amount of visual drama and aggression to the GLA. And of course, this grille is also unique to the AMG line, which is more blingy, more in your face, and I think looks really nice. Now, all versions of the GLA get full LED headlamps, and this GLA actually draws visual inspiration from the GLC and even the other bigger Mercedes SUVs, especially these tail lamps. These split tail lamps, it does remind you of the bigger, more expensive Mercedes SUVs. The AMG line body kit, it also gets twin exhausts and this mock diffuser kind of effect, so a little bit more sportiness to the rear. Now of course there is going to be a full-on GLA 35 AMG which will have even more visual aggression, but this is a good idea to actually add the AMG line body kit to the four-wheel drive version. 4MATIC badges out here. The GLA, it's actually a little shorter than the outgoing GLA by some 5-10 millimeters. So it is still a 4.4 meter long SUV, which is quite big for a compact premium SUV. But the wheelbase is longer. It is a little wider, 30 millimeters wider. So it has got better stance and it is much taller, over 100 millimeters taller. So that liberates more headroom and space inside the cabin. So let's check that out. So this GLA is 117 mm taller than the old GLA, and that does mean there is more space inside the cabin. Genuinely, this is much more spacious than the old GLA, which was cramped, and even by the standards of its class, it actually has a fair amount of space. So around 2-3 inches of free headroom. This driver seat is adjusted to my driving position. I'm 5'9" and I like a nice stretched out driving position. Despite that, I have again another 3 inches of free knee room. So this is spacious. Now the AMG line, it gets this Alcantara kind of effect on the seats, all black cabin, so it looks sporty. You have an armrest which is not there on the other versions. You get 2 USBs and USB-Cs because Mercedes only has USB-C. The wheelbase, it has increased by 30 millimeters and that is evident. So overall, there is significantly more space inside the GLA. But of course, this is Evo India. You want to know what the GLA is like from behind the driver's wheel. So let's get in there. Up front, things are even better. Now, honestly, you buy these SUVs, you should be driving it. If you want to be chauffeur driven in, there are much better options at this price range. You get the Tiguan Allspace, you get the Hyundai Tucson. Those are more suited to be chauffeur driven in. But if you like to take the wheel, then this GLA is lovely. Like all new Mercedes, it is very techy in here. So you get two 10.25-inch displays with this slab of digital real estate in front of you. These turbine-like vents look really cool. The AMG line gets this flat bottom steering wheel, controls on it. The bright work looks expensive. In fact, there's nothing out here that looks cheap. This is the most affordable SUV in the Mercedes lineup, but nothing looks like prices have been cut or corners have been cut on this. You get a panoramic sunroof, everything really. This is a very nice cabin, a very nice cockpit, to be honest. The GLA looks good on the outside. It is really nice on the inside. But what is it like to drive? The earlier GLA was only available, if you remember, with front wheel drive. This new GLA, you can get it with front wheel drive if you're stingy with your credit card or if you want only the petrol. But this GLA 220D gets 4MATIC. So that is all wheel drive. Plus you also get this AMG line body kit. And I can tell you that front wheel drive to all wheel drive does make a big difference. Put your foot down. So you get a better turn of speed, you get less fidgeting with the steering wheel in the front wheel drive, which I drove 3 weeks ago. You step on it and the wheel squirms in your hand as it struggles to put down all the torque. With all-wheel drive, and this all-wheel drive is an electromechanical system which is predictive, so it's not purely reactive that once it starts to slip, torque is sent to the rear, but this is predictive. And even in the middle of the corner, you step on it and it stays planted. The wheel doesn't squirm in your hand. It is so much more poised, so much more confident, and this really does have a quick turn of speed. 0 to 100 takes 7.3 seconds. That is 1/10 of a second quicker than the front wheel drive. So actually, on paper, it is nothing. The differences in terms of performance is hardly anything. But in the way it puts down the power, that's where it makes such a big difference. You can use more of the power, and when the roads are wet or slippery or there's a little gravel on it, it is more composed and also safer. The top speed with this 4MATIC is 219 kilometers per hour, and with the front wheel drive it's 222 kilometers per hour. So there is a slight bit of difference, and there is a big difference in terms of the fuel economy, which we will come to. But otherwise, in all respects, this 4MATIC, it is my pick. The reason why the steering fidgets so much in the front wheel drive is because of the torque, and this engine makes 400 Newton meters of it. It's a lot of torque, a very torquey engine. This is the 220D diesel, and it makes 187 bhp of power. So it is a quick car, and in terms of refinement also, it is very good. Now earlier Merc diesels were noisy, you could hear it, but in this, at a steady cruise, it is very silent. And the transmission, it is a new 8-speed twin clutch automatic. The earlier GLA had a 7-speed twin clutch. This 8-speed is far more refined. So the jerkiness that we used to associate with that old DCT, that is gone. There are some times when there is a slight bit of hesitation or a slight jerk, but overall, it actually shifts very well. And then when you stick it in dynamic mode, the shifts are really hard and fast. So you don't get launch control, but when you gun it from a standstill, the shifts are hard and quick. Like now, it really shifts hard and quick. It's put. And then you get these paddle shifters, so you can manually operate the gearbox, and it actually works rather quickly and very responsive. Now, fuel economy, because these cars are assembled in India, so they have gone through the ARAI testing, and according to the ARAI cycle, the 4MATIC, it delivers 18.91 kilometers to the liter, whereas the front wheel drive, it delivers 20.85 kilometers to the liter. So there is a 2 kmpl difference, but this is a diesel. If it was a petrol, then that would pinch, but in a diesel, it does not pinch all that much. And I must not forget to mention this, you get an 8-year engine and transmission warranty. So that is the best in this class right now. The entire car has a 3-year warranty, but engine and transmission, 8 years. Mercedes are that confident of the quality and the reliability of this powertrain. As for the petrol, you do get the GLA 200, which will be the entry point into the range. It makes 161 bhp of power, 250 Nm of torque and does 0 to 100 in 8.7 seconds. The fuel efficiency, 17.43 kmpl as tested by the ARAI. The way the GLA drives is a big improvement over the past. This MFA platform is torsionally more rigid and it is more sophisticated. So you get McPherson struts up front, but you get an independent multi-link setup at the rear. It's no longer a torsion beam and that gives it better road manners, more sophisticated road manners. Of course, with these 19-inch tires, so you have a large footprint, you get a lot of grip around corners, and body roll is surprisingly well contained. So you can hustle it. Of course, the steering is not really brimming with feel and feedback, but you can drive this fast. Throw it around a bend and it grips really well. There's 147 mm of ground clearance and this is a high riding car. But despite that, the direction changes are quick, the steering is precise and responsive, it is agile, and this is a fun, engaging car to drive. And in fact, in the city, it is actually a very relaxing car, very easy to drive, rather effortless. And the ride quality is also pretty good. Even though it's running 19-inch wheels, the ride is good. So in the city, it's excellent actually, really excellent. I've been using this for a week now and I think it's very nice, very nicely resolved. But is it better than an X1? Let's find out. The X1 is the OG. This was the very first premium compact SUV, and in the past, like all BMWs, it came with a proper rear drive platform. No longer. Now the X1 gets the UKL platform, which has transverse engines and is natively front wheel drive. In the past, you also got the X-Drive versions, but now you only get the S-Drive, and S-Drive means front wheel drive. The X1 gets the 2-liter diesel engine, the tried and tested BMW 2-liter diesel, and it makes 187 bhp and 400 Newton meters of torque. So the figures are bang identical to the Mercedes GLA. 0 to 100 kmph takes 7.8 seconds and top speed is 222 kilometers per hour, which actually makes it slower off the line than the Mercedes. Normally that would be the familiar selling point for the BMW. Buy the BMW because you want a faster car. But that no longer is the case. And the Merc's engine is actually a little more urgent and a little more peppy, even under the foot. Even though on paper the figures are the same, the Mercedes does feel more sprightly and more eager. The BMW gets the 8-speed gearbox, which is a regular torque converter, which shifts really smoothly, but it doesn't have the same snappy responses as the Mercedes twin clutch. So how does the X1 drive? Well, this is not like BMWs that we know and love. There is a fair bit of body roll, there is a fair bit of understeer. But that said, and if I had to compare it with the GLA, even though this has more body roll, that body roll actually puts a little more weight on the outside tires and then it grips a little bit more than the Mercedes. So the Mercedes, it starts to understeer earlier, whereas the BMW, you can lean on it a little harder, lean on those outside tires, push it that little bit more than the Mercedes. So in terms of that dynamic polish, the chassis is not a very sharp, a very engaging chassis. The steering also doesn't have a great amount of feedback, but it still has a slight edge in terms of dynamics. Only thing is that edge is very slight. So the chassis doesn't set any dynamic benchmarks, and honestly, neither does the cabin. In fact, after the Mercedes, this cabin is decidedly underwhelming. The screen is much smaller. The clocks are analog, so you get analog dials, not the full digital screen. And honestly, now the Mercedes' digital screen looks decidedly more sophisticated and more expensive. The X1, it is ripe for a facelift. A facelift has to be coming because in this shape and with this kind of specs, this cabin can't compete with the GLA. And I'm giving you the honest, unvarnished truth. The steering wheel, it's very thin. This does not get the M Sport kit. This definitely needs the M Sport kit. This definitely needs a bigger touchscreen. All of this, it does the job. There's no two ways about it. But it doesn't make you go wow anymore. And cars need to make you go wow, especially new cars. When you buy a new car, you need to go wow. Mercedes GLA versus BMW X1 is the obvious head-to-head comparison. There are of course other rivals including the Volvo XC40 and the Audi Q2, but nothing makes a statement or turns heads like this newly updated Mini Countryman. The Mini is not an obvious rival to the GLA and the X1. Minis, after all, have been very left field options, something that is very unique, something very different, something that you actually went and splurged on. But no longer, because this Countryman is a straight up rival to the GLA in terms of the size, in terms of the specs, in terms of the price, everything. And it is a very cool alternative to the GLA and the X1. Like these interiors, they are so funky, so cool, so interesting to look at. There is so much of design that has been lavished on it. Okay, now design, you might fault it, you might not like the way it has been designed. And styling is a very personal subject. Some things that I like, you might not like, and vice versa. But what is indisputable is the fact that a lot of effort has been lavished on the Countryman, both on the outside and the inside. And I like its quirky styling. I might not love it, but it definitely looks different from everything else. With the Countryman, you definitely will get noticed. No two ways about that. Now, in terms of equipment, you really can't fault the Mini, but when you compare it with the GLA has got those huge screens. The Mini has got this tiny little screen in the middle of this huge circle out here, and another digital display in front of me, which seems to have a coating of some kind, and I'm sure that needs it to make it readable in direct sunlight. It also has a head-up display, and these rocker switches are just so cool. It's something that has been there on Minis for ages, but still, this does not get old. Look at these switches out here, this button out here to open the sunroof. Of course, the shade for the sunroof is manual, but then the opening of it is electric, and it gets two sunroofs, not one big panoramic sunroof. The steering wheel, very nice, really nice to hold. The sportiest feeling. It also feels more sporty than the AMG kit on the GLA. These seats, they look so cool and they are very supportive and very comfortable. Again, the best seats in this class. The engine, the Countryman, it only gets the petrol engine. This is the 2-liter petrol engine that makes 189 bhp. It is slightly slower than the diesel in terms of the 0 to 100 times, but more or less it is on par, and because it is a turbocharged petrol engine, so there is good amount of torque, and it's got a very responsive gearbox. And this engine, it does sound sporty. So I'll stick it in sport mode. Cool button out here for the sport mode. It does sound cool. I think a lot of these noises are piped in through the speakers, but doesn't matter. It does make the Mini feel pretty enthusiastic. Now, Minis are supposed to handle well, right? A Mini has always been a sporty car. That's in the DNA. And the Countryman, it does handle well. Now, it's got the same platform as the X1. So this is front wheel drive, the UKL platform, and it has a fair bit of body roll. In fact, slightly more body roll than the X1. But because this has wider tires, these are 18s, the X1 has 17s, so you get slightly more cornering grip. So dynamically, actually, this is the most polished in the class. At least it is the fastest round corners. And it is actually very predictable. So even though it descends into understeer when you push it really hard, it is controllable and predictable. You know exactly what the Mini is up to. The Mini, it's actually got a rather long-winded name. Mini Countryman Cooper S JCW inspired. A rather long name. Now I must give you a bit of a backstory on the Countryman. The first generation Countryman that came to India, it came in as a full CBU. And the thing that I remember most about that Countryman is that its suspension, for all intents and purposes, did not exist. The ride quality, oh God, it was so stiff, so stiff. This Countryman is so much better, so much more accommodating, so much better over bumps and potholes. You can actually call this comfortable. And because of that, of course, there is a fair bit of body roll, but that's a fair trade-off, especially in our conditions and in our country. With these kind of roads, if you had the old Countryman, your teeth would fall off. This Countryman that we're driving, this is actually the facelift, but it doesn't really need it because honestly, where do you see Countrymen on the road? Countryman, plural is countrymen, right? So anyway, where do you see Countrymen on the road? This is still such a unique and different car. You will see plenty of GLAs very soon. There are plenty of X1s already there on the road. But a Countryman, it stands you out from the crowd. This is an unexpected surprise, to be honest. So would I recommend the Mini Countryman? Definitely. It looks so cool on the inside. It makes you smile. So interesting on the outside. So different from the regular crowd. Of course, if you want a diesel, then you will have to go the X1 way because the Countryman only gets the petrol. Or, of course, there is the GLA which has both petrol as well as diesel. Which amongst these three should you pick? Well, that's the verdict which is coming up next. I've never really been a fan of this breed. Premium compact SUVs, they've only been hatchbacks with compromised dynamics, but no longer. And setting the benchmark out here is this new Mercedes Benz GLA. Now, I didn't expect the GLA to score such an outright and comprehensive victory. Normally in tests such as these, it's always been the BMW that scores on dynamics and the Mercedes on a few other luxury aspects. But here, the new GLA is such a better rounded and more mature car than its predecessor. It has got more space, it is more roomy, it has got far better interiors, the dynamics are better tied down, and it looks really cool. In fact, on the styling front, it's only the Mini that actually can hold a candle to the GLA. It looks quirky, it looks funky, and Minis, they've always been on the fringes. Something very different, a little more expensive than its more mainstream rivals, but no longer. In fact, the Countryman, if you opt for the non-JCW pack, you actually get it at under 40 lakh rupees. And the GLA, it will be the most expensive. We don't know its prices as of now, but between 45 to 47 lakhs is what you're looking at, which is around 3-4 lakhs more than the X1. So it is the most expensive in this test, but it is the best SUV in this test. Subscribe to the Evo India channel and hit the bell icon to keep pace with the thrill of driving.